when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed in 2017, what were you able to do because of that?
Well, we were able to increase our production. We were able to buy a couple more tanks, increase our production, which increased our revenue, which meant we could hire more people, which means we could do more events for our local community, more fundraisers. It was amazing. Being able to have, to write off 100% of depreciation on equipment was a huge benefit to us. We were able to, again, expand our production, which means increase product, which means increase revenue, which means increase margins, which means we could pay our guys more. And most of our employees are veterans. And it means we could hire more, which means we could get more veterans off the streets and working. It had a profound impact. And I know a lot of people hate the term trickle-down economics.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm the host, David Fromm. Picture this. It's the weekend and you're ready to unwind, maybe catch up with friends or spouse and spend some quality time. So you all decide to head to one of your favorite local breweries. They've got one of your favorite beers on tap, and maybe there's a great band or a singer performing that night. As you sit back and enjoy the night, have you ever thought about what it actually takes to get a brewery up and running? Well, today's guest knows all about it. He's one of the owners of a brewery in Texas, and he's here to share the journey from the first idea of starting the brewery to opening the doors and growing the business. Before he dived into the world of craft beer, he served in the Army and worked in the oil fields where he gained skills that actually help him with the brewery. I want to welcome to the podcast George Rice, who's one of the owners of the veteran-owned 5x5 Brewing in Mission, Texas. George, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show, guys. Really appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, no, we really appreciate you making time. Hey, before we jump into talking about the brewery and Tax Cut and Jobs Act and all that, most people who served in the Army have a nickname. Did you have a nickname?
I had several nicknames, but the most prevalent was Mongo and Smokey were the two nicknames that I held that fell through, that carried throughout my military service.
Nice. Well, I won't ask you how you got any of those names, but anyway, just kidding.
If you ever watch the movie Blazing Saddles, it has a very well description of Mongo in there, and that's what they nicknamed me after. And the other one was Smokey due to a smoke grenade that went off on me in the middle of a firefight. And that was an interesting story for another time.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, hey, I want to talk a little bit about your time in military service. I mean, why'd you decide to join the military? I mean, some people do because it's a military family or some event happened. What made you decide to join?
I was playing college football. I was a scholarship athlete to Texas A&M Kingsville. It's a big time D2 college football campus out here in South Texas. I was a defensive lineman for them and kind of saw 9/11 unfold and wanted to serve, wanted to fight. So went to the recruiting office and the Marine said I was too big. I weighed like 305 at the time at 6'4". And said I was too big, that they had standards, and said I had to get down to 220. And I hadn't weighed that since like 7th grade. But here's the Army, and they're like, hey, come on over, man. You looks like you could rip down a brick wall. I'm like, yeah. And signed up in the Army, went Army infantry, and no regrets. I enjoyed it.
So the Army kind of picked you in a way. But I didn't know the Marines had such strict size requirements. I mean, that's really pretty incredible.
Well, it was kind of a trip because, I grew up, a lot of my family members were Marines. My uncle, my grandfather was retired master gunnery sergeant, my uncle, and they're all very large men, very tall, broad shoulders. So in my head, I was thinking the 1990s commercial, this big, strong Marine climbing a mountain, slaying dragons with a sword. And I showed up at the recruiting station, and here's these small, skinny looking guys, and they're like, yeah, we have standards, you need to drop some weight. And I'm in the best shape of my life at the time. I'm playing defensive line for a college football team. I'm benching, squatting. I could outrun all these guys. I was literally looking at the office as they were telling me no, and I was just visualizing like there's not a single person I couldn't kill here right now if I didn't want to. And it just kind of caught me off guard that they were that strict on the height and weight standards, which is pretty antiquated. They're fixing it now, but walked right out, and here's this Army recruiter and real big, strong, stout black guy. And he's just like, hey, come over here. You ever hear of Rangers? I'm like, yeah, I heard of Rangers. Like, come on over. I'm like, okay, like Con Air, just like Con Air. Well, he lied to me. I definitely didn't go Rangers. I just went infantry, but I went to a mountain warfare unit, 10th Mountain Division, and deployed a few dozen times with those guys to Iraq and Afghanistan.
Oh, wow. I mean, man, thank you for doing that. So 9/11 was a pivotal moment in your decision to join.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, I think, people of a certain age, it really, a lot of folks who kind of were born later than all of us sometimes don't really realize how impactful that was in our lives at that time. I grew up in New Jersey, and so I knew a lot of folks who were really impacted and a few people who died. And it was just such a seminal moment in our history, and kind of made, people like you made a decision to go serve and pick up arms. I really appreciate that.
It definitely was a pivotal moment in my life that changed the outcome of a lot of things and changed my decision making on what my goals and everything were. Like, I was 18 or 19 playing college football. So in the back of my head, I'm going to go into NFL type mentality. And then, 9/11 was a wake up call. Like, I got to do something with my life.
Well, so you're on tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, and then you get out of the Army, and then you start working in oil fields. What did you do in the oil fields?
Well, it didn't start off the oil field. I got out of the Army and I landed flat on my face. Nothing was working out. The GI Bill was taking forever to kick in. I was having problems getting into college, at least getting the benefits to get into college. So I applied for FBI, CIA, DPS, Border Patrol, and I was going through the hiring process with all of them. But this is again during the previous administration, during the Obama administration, and the hiring process was very much delayed. It was like 12 to 18 months just to get in the door. And I had a wife. I have a wife. I had a newborn child, and I had another one on the way, and I was broke. So I didn't have very many options. I was working on the border levy. I was working downtown security. I was running a weapons training company. And I was just hustling as much as I could to feed the kids and keep a roof over our head. And then as I'm waiting to get hired by one of these 3-letter agencies, I get a headhunter that calls me like, hey, we are looking for someone with your skill set. That was middle management in the military, especially combat arms, because of the high stress environment. Have you ever thought about the oil field? I've never once considered oil field or anything like that. But when she told me what the money was, I didn't think it was. I thought she was lying. There's like no way that they're offering someone like me this type of money just coming out of the military. And it was accurate. So I went to Schlumberger, a very, very good salary, and I became bonus eligible real quick. And I moved around in the oil field, and it was very hard work, but it was amazing money. The financial opportunities that it provided was just outstanding.
So from there, you go and start up a brewery? I mean, take me through how that prepared you for it, but then how did you decide to go and take this leap?
So we're pretty frugal with our money. We saved. You're getting out of debt. You don't make a lot of money when you're in the military, so you don't leave the military very financially sound. So we had to catch up, and then we got ahead. And I wanted to work for myself. I had this crazy idea. Breweries were all the rage all across the U.S. at the time. This is 2016, 2018. And I'm like, man, South Texas doesn't have a brewery. And I had a couple friends that were interested, were interested. So we all got together. I already had a passion for it because, I made some of my own beer overseas. And I was getting into trying to distill on my own as well within the legal parameters. And we came up and meshed out a business plan. We LLC'd in 2016. And we opened in 2018.
So what was it like getting started? I mean, what were like the biggest hurdles? I mean, I think I've met people who have started breweries, but I've never really thought it through, like what it takes. I got to imagine there's a lot of like upfront capital costs and all that.
A lot of upfront capital costs. There's a lot of math and a lot of biology and a lot of manufacturing. You have to be manufacturing savvy to get into this because it's production. At the end of the day, it's called a brewery, but at the end of the day, you're a production facility, and it takes a lot of time. But probably the biggest hurdles that we had to go through was local, county, state, and federal regulations. It was just, I mean, I probably killed half of forest just on paperwork alone. Just the amount of different licensing you have to go through. You need a license for this, you need a license for that. Like very overly redundant. Some of it kind of comes off as a cash grab. It was just, the licensing and the regulations that you have to follow was just astounding. I pay 3 different licensing. I have a federal license that I have to replicate at the state side, and then I have to replicate that at the county side and at the local side. The county, the state, the county, and the local government actually doesn't do anything for the license. Like, they don't regulate it. They just want their money. And, it's like a $2,000, registration fee every year type stuff. It was problematic. It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I wish that was an uncommon story. I mean, unfortunately, it's not the only industry where we find, we talked to a lot of different folks who have started businesses and some who have had businesses who failed. And it just seems like everywhere government has figured out how to regulate and overregulate and certainly get their part of it. So I give you credit for overcoming but I mean, you probably had a passion for making beer. I guess if you're gonna start a brewery, like what kind of beers do you make? And like, how did you get into it?
Again, I started making beer myself overseas a little bit. And then I had a friend that was a big time home brewer. And I had a manufacturing background simply because I understand fluid dynamics and I understand hydraulics very well from the oil field, understanding how to get product from point A to point B, to do something to it, to send it down the hole or to bring it up from the hole. So I knew fluid dynamics, I knew very well. So I already had a lot of the skill sets that you needed for this. Everyone thinks, making beer, brewing, it's all about the ingredients. Actually, no, the ingredients is probably about 5% of brewing. The process is everything. Understanding heats, what it does, how it releases starches, understanding enzymes, understanding yeast and how temperatures and pHs and different minerals affect that. And I was good at that because, again, that's what we did in the oil field with what I did with hydraulic stimulation. So, we got going, we got launched. It was a learning curve. We had a little 1-barrel pilot system, and then we upgraded from that to a larger 5-barrel system. And then people are shocked at the amount of beer that we produce because we have a relatively small system. We only have a 5-barrel system, but we produced year to date. We produced this year alone 22,000 case equivalents of beer already, and we're barely going to be in March. Yeah. We burn and turn, and we do more traditional like Irish Reds, blondes, lagers. We don't really do the crazy IPAs and the stouts like all the other guys. We keep it kind of traditional.
Yeah, I can respect that. Sure. As a kind of a traditional beer guy myself. How do you come up with the name? Do you have interesting names for your beers?
Most of them are military themed. Like we have our 40 Mike coffee stout, which actually we released the market because HEB, it's a huge grocery store here in Texas, specifically requested it because of how popular it was. It was one of our most highest ranked beers on Untapped, and then HEB got it, but they didn't like it because there was like a gun on there and there was a skull on there. It was amazing artwork done by a veteran depicting a Vietnam vet with the 40 Mike, and they they said they couldn't take it because of the artwork. So we scrapped that. But everything that we do is kind of military themed in one way or another. We have a Moore Airfield Base, an old Army airfield base out here. So we have a beer called the Moorfield Blonde. We have FUBAR, which if you're military, you know what that acronym means. So we have FUBAR Irish Red. Actually, Texas did not like that name. So Texas, the government, said no. So we added an extra R to it just to get it passed through Texas, because that's how smart we are down here.
Way to be innovative, man. That's great. So my understanding is that you guys hold some interesting events at the brewery. Can you tell me about some of those?
We're real community focused. We always give back. We're really big on nonprofits, especially veteran nonprofits that don't have an overhead, like a veteran nonprofit that doesn't have a CEO that's making $400,000 a year type stuff. So we're always doing stuff for different animal rescue groups, different military and law enforcement based nonprofits. We're always having community events. We just had a large car show about 2 weeks ago called Rockabilly Rumble. It's all like 40s, 50s, and 60s rat rods and classics, and then pinups, and then it's just music. It's all themed. So yeah, we have a good time. We throw parties all the time out there, and it's fun.
Nice. What do you guys do on Memorial Day?
Memorial Day, we do something called roll call. And so it's a tradition that it's a morbid tradition in the military. But at the end of a conflict, at the end of a firefight, when you do your accountability, you do a roll call. And the tradition is that, the senior enlisted guy of that element of that squad or platoon will call out, the names of the guys on the roster. And then he'll call out a name 3 times, and it progresses like Sergeant Duffy, Sergeant Shane Duffy, Sergeant Shane A. Duffy. And then the senior enlisted guy was like Sergeant Shane A. Duffy, KIA, date and time. And so a roll call, it's pretty much a way of calling out and naming the ones that aren't here anymore, the ones that gave the ultimate sacrifice, not the ones who just passed away, but the ones that were killed in combat. So on Memorial Day, we do a roll call at the brewery. It's a lot of GWAT veterans that come on in, and we'll give out free drinks and everything. And, someone will bring a couple bottles and they'll be doing shots. And we do, it's just a brotherhood, camaraderie, and then us remembering our brothers. Everyone else, it's about the car deals and it's about the barbecue. But for some of us, Memorial Day has a huge meaning and has a lot of impact. So we wanted to kind of do that to kind of not snub our nose at the rest of society, but just like to kind of let them know, like, hey, this is what Memorial Day is about. It's not about your hot dogs and hamburgers. It's about remembering the guys that went out there and didn't make it back.
Yeah, I mean, there's a much deeper meaning, and it's obviously more meaningful for those of you who have served alongside, those brothers in arms who died. I'm glad you can give a place for that. And so you guys are down in Mission, Texas, right? And for our folks listening, I mean, that's on the border. I've been to Mission. I think we talked about that. I've been to Mission, and McAllen was right next door, and like you guys are right there on the border. And I know there's a lot of former military and also just folks in law enforcement down in that area. How does that kind of affect the area you're at and like the nature of your brewery?
We're in a really patriotic area. I know we're right here on the border. Traditionally, it's a very blue area. It was a Democratic stronghold for years, but a lot of conservative values, a lot of family values, a lot of generational service member that their grandfather served in World War II, their uncle served in Vietnam, they served in GWAT. Global War on Terrorism, those that don't know what that acronym is. And so we have a very, very ultra patriotic community down here. And, a lot of law enforcement, government's probably the biggest employer down here with local law enforcement, state and federal. And so we have a lot of service members in the area that retire or get out or do their time and come back here to raise their families. So it actually... our company and our brand does really well given the demographic of the amount of service members that we have that live down here, or veterans that live down here.
So when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed in 2017, what were you able to do because of that?
Well, we were able to increase our production. We were able to buy a couple more tanks, increase our production, which increased our revenue, which meant we could hire more people, which means we could do more events for our local community, more fundraisers. It was amazing. Being able to have, just to write off 100% of depreciation on equipment was a huge benefit to us. We were able to, again, expand our production, which means increase product, which means increase revenue, which means increase margins, which means we could pay our guys more. And most of our employees are veterans. And it means we could hire more, which means we could get more veterans off the streets and working. It had a profound impact. And I know a lot of people hate the term trickle down economics, but we're a perfect case of it. Everything that we brought in and we were able to get from that went straight right back out into our community one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it's supposed to work, right? It's like, you're able to build out your business and not be hampered by, what I'd consider unnecessarily high government taxes. It lets you invest. I mean, that's what people who own and build businesses want to do is, employ people and grow.
No, I said it's all about growth. If you're not growing, if you become stagnant, you become irrelevant. When you become irrelevant, you fold. And our goal is just keep growing and keep our head down to the grindstone and just keep going.
So I think, as Congress has not yet reauthorized the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. We're very hopeful and doing our part as Americans for Prosperity to try to make that happen. But even though they haven't expired yet, is that playing a role in how you make decisions going forward?
Yeah, we are not reinvesting yet into more equipment and everything until we see what happens. Because I'll give you an example. If you have to do a call for capital, like if you have to pull a loan, would you pull a loan right now, or would you pull a loan on the speculations that interest rates are about to drop in a few months? It's the same thing with the tax credits. These are all indicators and things like, hey, if we could save a couple $1,000s, off of, $80,000 purchase, let's wait. So right now we're kind of in a holding pattern and we're kind of waiting to see what happens with that and a few other things.
So, just to be clear, if the Tax Cut and Jobs Act went away, that would impact the number of events you do, the way you invest in your business, whether, how you'd grow. It'd have a real impact on your business.
Yeah, it has a massive impact, especially on small businesses. I've seen a lot of the arguments against the tax cuts, and everyone's like, oh, it's for large corporations. I'm like, nah, like this is specifically for guys like me.
Yeah, I think it's a story that, we keep trying to tell, but, really needs to get out there more and more is that, this legislation, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, really helped families, but also small businesses in a big way, and, helps create jobs. Unfortunately, we've had, the last 4 years have been really difficult with inflation and, just bad policy that's really made it more and more difficult for businesses. So hopefully we kind of get back to the good times of empowering people and keep more of their money and letting businesses grow so they can keep employing people.
What do we call it? We're like, let businesses be businesses. Let us do what we need to do. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be regulation or anything like that. The regulation is needed. Of course, it's important, but you can strangle out companies real easily by over regulating. We're not against paying taxes. Of course, we're all for paying taxes, but make it fair and make it reasonable where we can make decisions. If you want to overtax us, fine, but remember, that's less jobs, that's less production, that's less growth, and that's the way we look at it. Take a leash off a dog, and they're going to run rampant. Take a leash off of us, and we're going to grow quickly. And that's the best way I can actually put it when I try to explain to people how this impacts our decision making and impacts, who we hire, what we hire, how we pay, and what we do and what we give back. Last time I checked, I haven't seen any of these large beer companies donating to like a local baseball team, but we do it all the time. So, if you want to support local, you should really consider supporting this.
Yeah, well said. George, I want to thank you for first coming on the podcast and talking to us about your life and your life's work. Thank you for the way you serve this country in the military, and then the great work you're doing serving your community, by employing people, employing veterans, and having the events that you have. So I really appreciate the work that you've just done in your life, and that you're willing to share it with us here on the podcast.
Well, I'm a huge fan of what you guys do, not only on the podcast, but for AFP. Big fan, been volunteering for them for years. And I was just grateful for the opportunity to come out here and kind of share my story briefly. So thank you guys.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks. Hey, folks, if you like this episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend liberty and freedom. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.